Welcome to BIV Today, the daily podcast from the Newsroom of Business in Vancouver. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief. Today, we're continuing our three-part series that examines the perspectives and practices of CEOs as chronicled in the annual PwC CEO Survey. Now, other segments in the series have looked at matters of CEO optimism and on climate change, but this conversation today looks at an issue CEOs have raised as a concern in the survey: cybersecurity. With remote work emerging in the pandemic and with concerted efforts, particularly abroad, to hack into our data systems, CEOs worry about the safety of their information. So joining me in the conversation is Alvin Madar. He's the BC cybersecurity leader for PwC Canada, and Hamid Shahbazi is the CEO of Well Health, a primary healthcare provider based here in Vancouver. Good to have you both with us.
Thanks, Kirk. Nice to be here.
Great to be here. Alvin, start me off though about how the pandemic in particular has accelerated just digital in general and with the consequences, of course, for information.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess we have all felt it, right? Like basically when the pandemic happened, all organizations started figuring out how to work from home, right? And that really accelerated the journey. I always say that, I think all organizations were trying to find the right way to work from home even before the pandemic. But with the pandemic, there was no choice. So a lot of organizations started having to move their employees into a work from home model. And so they had to make the investments and everything, right? So that's from the internal side of internal perspective. From an external perspective, what I find is actually, even for myself, I'm a lot more comfortable shopping online now than even before the pandemic. Right now, I actually prefer to shop online. So organizations are starting to see that as well. And so they're actually accelerating the investment in digital to satisfy that need for online retail.
But with that activity, of course, comes a lot of transitioning of information, a lot of sharing, a lot of, and a lot of risk.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And that's actually one of the reasons why, most CEOs that we interviewed during the survey, they're saying that cybersecurity is a top concern now, right? It's actually pretty funny. So in the global report, the pandemic is a higher concern than cybersecurity. So cybersecurity was a top 2 concern. But in the Canadian slice of the survey, cybersecurity is actually top of mind for all CEOs. So.
Well, interesting. Hamid, your organization, of course, has emphasized, has been very, very early out of the gates in a lot of ways with online transition, transformation. But tell me a little bit about how the pandemic has accelerated that, even for you.
Yeah, well, like I mentioned before, it kind of forces everybody to figure out an infrastructure to work from home, right? And also at the same time, from a cybersecurity perspective, how do we make sure that when people are working from home, information isn't leaked in other ways that we never anticipated? So that was a very heavy investment in trying to figure out how to secure the data, with the work from home model. And what I can see going forward is, I think, one thing that the organizations learned throughout the pandemic is the work from home model is actually really good for the employees. The employees love having that flexibility. And also at the same time, it actually is safe. It actually reduced costs for a lot of organizations as well. So as we come off this pandemic, I don't think it'll be a fully work from home model like we have in the last year. I can see a hybrid model emerging where, it'll be a split between working in the office and working from home. So, this whole trend of investing in the digital technology, I cannot see that slowing down going forward.
Yeah. Hamid, let me turn to you and look at your organization, which already had a pretty strong online presence pre-pandemic, but it has very clearly become quite important during the pandemic that we still have access to healthcare, but we had to do it in a different way in a lot of ways. So tell me a little bit about how the pandemic has accelerated your own transformation as a company into digital.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Kirk. So the reason why I founded Well is because I noticed that there was a pretty anomalous lag in the digitization and modernization of healthcare as compared to other sectors. And a lot of that was for good reason, because of the value of the data, because of the importance of healthcare. We're talking about something that arguably there's nothing more important. Fundamental health data, fundamental caretaking models, and it's hard to change stuff that works, but we have to, because we're not producing enough physicians to take care of the growing number of people. There's a growing space there in terms of being able to take care of everyone. And so what do you need to do? Well, on one hand, you need to amplify doctors and allow them to be more capable in terms of seeing more patients. And you also have, so there's an empowerment of the practitioner, and then there's also an empowerment of the patient. Right before we started this event and talking this podcast, we're talking amongst all of us here the importance of behaviors. Well, a lot of people don't know how to behave, and so there's an enormous amount of digital empowerment that's coming into that. But stepping back, we know that no sector evades digitization. Digitization is and modernization is a fact of life, and healthcare was going to be stepping into that, into that environment and making that progress eventually. Now, it's interesting. We were told, "Oh, you're still too early. It's still going to take decades." And we didn't feel so. We didn't feel that was the case, frankly, because of just the changing demographics involving, Gen Zs and millennials becoming physicians. And our view was that they were going to be, just totally surprised that they wouldn't be able to engage in digital technologies, because that's what their whole world is about. And of course, and we started to see movement, even pre-pandemic. Ontario had just started to introduce digital, telehealth claim codes. Here in British Columbia, we'd had persistent telehealth claim codes for quite some time. Mind you, they hadn't been used extensively, but there was usage of them. And you could see that this conversation was occurring throughout the country, but really hadn't hit any kind of critical mass. And of course, the pandemic caused a sea change, because we went from a fraction of 1% to I think at the peak maybe 80% of all consultations occurred through telehealth. Now, telehealth didn't necessarily need to be a digital platform at that point. It could be a phone call, but it was remote care, and so that was incredibly important, because patients always wanted it. Patients want convenience. They don't want to come in and wait 2 hours to get a 5-minute meeting. But of course, there were 1,001 reasons why practitioners were against that. Security was one, and change management's another. Just becoming this new way of doing things. It's very, very a lot of cultural pain and change management in the medical industry. And so I think the pandemic, was a forcing function, and now what we see is practitioners generally love it, because it does give them some more flexibility in how they spend their time and energy, and we see a real spectrum of practitioners that just want to do telehealth, to ones that still like that physical practice and like to accent it once in a while to provide that convenience. But I can tell you almost categorically, every practitioner does some form of telehealth now. And now they do it confidently, because so much effort and energy is being put into protecting that data.
I mean, you talk about the change management issues, and of course that's there with pretty well anybody that has had to convert in a lot of ways to doing things in 2 dimensions, the way we're doing them right now. But one of the key challenges you have is that you're sitting on top of a lot of information, and that information, people have a bit of a weird paradox about it. I mean, they want their pharmacy to know what their doctor knows, to know what their specialist knows, to have access to an X-ray, to have, they want all that commingled, and yet they fear for their lives about the information getting in the wrong hands. So tell me a little bit about that challenge that you've had to basically confront, which is the concern that people have about the basic security of this data.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's security and privacy. I think it's a dual mode concern. On one hand, is my clinic owner, is my doctor, are the people in charge of this data, in terms of custodians of this data, keeping it safe. So that's and we've seen so many examples of corporations not spending enough, and as a result, there being some kind of breach and some kind of leakage of that information, and that causes pain. But we've also seen people just do the wrong thing with the data, and that's more of a privacy issue. We've seen, and no more, and there's no more a place where that's a bigger concern than healthcare. I mean, we're talking about things that we may or may not want family members to know, things that we may or may not want employers to know, and so, are the people who are administering this, and I use the word administration or administering or custodianship, very carefully, because there's only one entity in healthcare that truly owns healthcare data, and that's the patient. But you would not know it when you talk to people in the business all the time, because they talk about things like predictive analytics and machine learning, and we're going to read all this data, and we're going to do all this stuff. And the reality is the laws of the country just do not support that right now. There's this thing called informed consent, and the only real way this stuff really starts getting going is if patients consent, in a definitive and clear manner. And I don't think that starts to happen until you have really powerful patient empowerment tools. I'll call it the kind of the Googleification, amplification of this industry, where you log into something, some kind of storage locker, where you see everything there, and then you are intentional about wanting your data to be used to ameliorate the deep learning that's occurring on the platform. And I think if it happens, well, I should say, when it happens through platforms like Apple. We're now all accustomed to open our health app and look at how many steps we walked, and look at our activity levels on our Apple Watches. Well, we're really proud of this, but a few days ago, I guess a couple of weeks ago, we announced that we're the first electronic medical records provider in Canada to enable our clinical partners to have the patient data that's in our EMR to be downloaded to patients' health apps in Apple. So we've done an integration with Apple, and we're the very first ones. And so if you're a member of a Well clinic, which I think you are, Kirk, and your physician also participates in the program, you can actually now download your health records directly onto that app.
Yeah, and I guess I'll turn this one over to Alvin, though. I mean, the CEOs in the survey, it almost sounded as if they felt they were still playing with fire a little bit here. That in a lot of ways they are technologically savvy, they understand the capabilities, and they're worried that perhaps it overreaches, that it determines their behavior in a lot of ways, and they want that stability and security that comes with information. So how serious in the survey, Alvin, did you conclude that CEOs are now into this space where they recognize that the technological transformation is with us? It in a lot of ways it's almost over in terms of any debate, but how to use it is still very much a matter of debate.
Yeah. And actually, that's a very interesting finding in the survey. That actually surprised me as well. So basically, in terms of the top threat, like I mentioned, cybersecurity is the top threat, right? And 79% of the CEOs that we interviewed said that cybersecurity is the top threat. However, if you look at what they're doing tactically, it doesn't really correlate, because only 56% said that this cybersecurity program is factored into their risk management program. And then only 71% mentioned that they will be increasing their investment in the cybersecurity area in the next 3 years. So as you can see, it doesn't have a direct correlation there, which is, at first, it jumped out at me, because it's kind of surprising, because if you think that 79% of the people think it's a top concern, 79% of the people will actually spend money on cybersecurity to improve their posture. However, having thought a little bit more about it, I think it speaks to more of the agility of the organizations. As we all know, when an organizations plan their budget, they plan their budget 8 months or 6 months before the next fiscal year, right? So they're always playing catch up. So, maybe a year and a half ago, organizations weren't really thinking about cybersecurity as the top threat as much. Back then, it was just at the beginning of COVID. So everybody was really just thinking about how do we survive being in a pandemic, right? But now, and so I can definitely see that the cybersecurity investment, if we ask the same question next year, that percentage is going to go up. And same with the fact that, incorporating that into the risk management program as well. And I think for the incorporation of cybersecurity in the risk management program, the reason why it was 56% of the CEOs said that they have factored cybersecurity into risk management programs because a lot of organizations, they still run their departments in silo. And a lot of the time, the cybersecurity program isn't under the risk management team. So, when you're running things in silo, each teams may not have full visibility into, what the other teams are doing, etc. Right? And that's probably one of the reasons why that was, in terms of the percentage, it was a little bit lower.
Between 2018 and 2020, CEOs grew steadily pessimistic about the future economy. This year, confidence is back. But optimism doesn't equal strategy. How can CEOs set priorities that will sustain growth beyond the bounce? Discover more in our 24th annual Canadian CEO Survey.
Yeah. So Hamid, then what kind of priority do you have to put on security of this information in order, do you think, in order to accelerate even the digitization that you've got of your operation, and concurrently the reputational issues that come with building that trust among not only the professionals that use it, but obviously the consumers?
Yeah. So I think, a couple of things. One is, I think organizations will have to become even more agile going forward, right? Like, the traditional way of budgeting 6 to 8 months before the fiscal year, that may have to switch a little bit just because things are moving so fast, right? I think Hamid said it earlier, even their industry, they're moving so fast. And then, once a pandemic hit, it forces everybody's hands to move even faster. So I think, in terms of budgeting, figuring out investments, organization has to be more agile. The other thing is, in terms of trust and reputations, couple of things, right? One is, I think every time we open the news, we see a cybersecurity breach, right? The latest one that we saw that was big was the Colonial Pipeline down in the US, which actually disrupted half of the US from a, oil and gas perspective, right? And that does erode trust. And so I think organizations, there's two perspectives. One is the customer-facing stuff. If an organization gets breached and their customer data is leaked out to the public, their online presence, their online retail presence is going to go down significantly. I would not want to deal with an organization that doesn't take care of my data, right? From an internal perspective, they have a lot of IPs, etc. And if that get breached and, the IPs, the private information gets leaked out to the public, that does also affect their reputation. And also at the same time, it affects, there will be a lot of associated costs with, the incident response areas.
Sure. So let me turn to Hamid in this one, because Hamid, your organization obviously has digitized quite extensively, but as you push yourself further in all of this, concurrent to this is the sense of building and entrenching consumer and practitioner trust in all of this. So where do you put the priority here, and how do you do it, and more specifically, how do you communicate that to the market so people feel quite safe in using something like Well Health?
Well, I think very thoughtfully and very authentically, and you have to spend money. We made a decision after doing the analysis that this was by far our biggest risk. Not just because we're a healthcare company, because we're a publicly traded company, because we are also a digital platform company. We sit on top of an EMR that sits on top of 20 million plus patient profiles. It's pretty serious stuff. And when we looked at the totality of what we needed to do to support our business, we realized that we would be significant consumers of cybersecurity consulting and products and services. And so we decided that the light bulb came on, the aha moment that, wait a second, we shouldn't just be a consumer, we should be a provider. This is a big deal. I mean, this is a lot of zeros. So we've now made it a core of our business, a cornerstone of our business. We've acquired 2 cybersecurity businesses. We've created a business unit dedicated to security, and it's a multi-million-dollar, better than $20 million revenue business for us, quite profitable. But we're probably the biggest consumers. We're the biggest customers of that line of business, and that makes me feel great that we have made it as big of a deal as we have. I mean, it is not as profitable as other areas of our business, and nor does it need to be for us to keep it and nurture it and grow it. But we are absolutely thrilled that we have the capability that we do in-house. And we're very M&A driven. So the DD that we do, whether it's a clinical asset, a digital asset, or anything, we do extensive amounts of privacy and security work. And I think the fear with cybersecurity is well placed. I mean, listen, it doesn't really, like, you could spend, extensive amounts and people can still find a way to get in. There's a lot of smart hackers, there's nation states, there's a lot of shenanigans out there. But I think if you don't pay lip service to this, if you really take it seriously and you do the fundamentals, when I say the fundamentals, I mean, you should understand what that means to your industry. I think it's highly contextually relevant. And you need to employ the right professionals, because there's just no way the ordinary common folk can understand this to the degree it needs to be understood. We're just living a very different world now, and will increasingly do so. And it's not even just the concept of data protection. It's a concept of social engineering. It's a concept of, people putting social pressure on your people to leak data. There's all kinds of different things that are occurring out there on the fringes of cybersecurity that you'd be surprised if you sit down with someone like Alvin, who could take you through the many different perils. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to be in business and you're going to have data, I think it's just malpractice to not pay proper attention to this. And I think that's now commonly understood, but still underfunded to a great degree.
Yeah. But let me pick up on that thread a little bit, because I may be asking you to repeat a bit of what you've been saying, but it strikes me as a very interesting model that you've got, that you actually are probably going to almost mentor other healthcare firms to kind of avoid perhaps some of the lessons that you learned a bit more the hard way as you digitized. Is there something that you can point to that has been a signature lesson in digitization and around cybersecurity?
Well, I think that we did look at, I mean, probably more on the privacy end. There was a privacy situation in Ontario where an EMR company that's a well-honed, like a very well-known EMR company, one of the largest in the country, went out and started, anonymizing data and selling it to a pharmaceutical company, thinking, hey, we anonymized it, it's all great. Like, all right. And then there was this article in the paper where the privacy commissioners investigated that, and so in Canada, just simply anonymizing data and selling it is not kosher. and yeah. So having the a fully understanding the laws of the land and being in full compliance, and again, this comes back to the true ownership of the data, I think is really, really key. And so I think that was a teachable moment for us. Thankfully, we weren't the ones who made that sort of move. I think it was probably a logical move from that company. They're trying to unlock the value of their platform and so on and so forth. But what that told us is that, and we sort of looked at it within the context of like Google and Apple. And you may have walked around Toronto and see billboards from Apple that said, "We will never sell your data. We will never, your data. We will never read it. We will never do, And that was a teachable moment for us. So we came out and we said, we will never sell your data. We will never, you own your data. And that's become a true mantra. And you touched on this point earlier, Kirk. It was the education and I don't think too many companies have really come out and explicitly said that they will never do that without your explicit direction and instruction. But I think it's empowering. I think it's what we need, and it's what WELL is about. And we're really pleased to be able to say that, especially as a major player in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I want to conclude a conversation with some closing thoughts from each of you about the importance, though, of all of this issue in terms of the public trust in organizations, and in a lot of ways, whether the pandemic has accelerated also the need for a greater trust in institutions and companies, because in a lot of ways the personal relationships may, they may not quite be similarly fostered as they were in pre-pandemic times. We're going to be doing more of our dealings, across the digital platforms. Alvin, start me with some thoughts there about the importance of this and what it means in terms of trust and reputation.
Yeah, so I think you hit the nail on the head right there, right? Yes, organizations are starting to move from like a physical relationship with clients or with the customers to an online digital relationship. So that's why cybersecurity is so important, because cybersecurity is basically your backbone to having that trusted digital relationship with your customers. So without that trust, I just don't think an organization can survive in this new post-pandemic digital world. And that's why I think, going forward, organizations have to start incorporating their cybersecurity strategy and aligning them to their business strategy. That is the only way going forward.
Yeah. And Hamid, how crucial is this issue for you?
I think it's everything. I mean, if you think about trust, let's just focus on that word for a second. It's what do we know about trust? We know it's very, very hard to earn. True, authentic trust, it takes time. And we also know that you can lose it in an instant. And so, when you understand the fragility of that concept, and in many ways in the world, we are at a crisis of trust because of, we don't know whether or not we can believe what we hear. And, it's often from people who we're supposed to trust the most. We're recently hearing that, there's a great deal of discussion about whether or not the pandemic was lab generated or a normal, zoonotic, virus evolution.
Listen, we're journalists. We're going to get to the bottom of this. Don't worry about it. You can trust us.
I know you will. But that's the point, Kirk. Great point. And I think that we live in a time where we want to know the truth, we deserve to know the truth, and we will get to the bottom of everything. And so I think it ushers in a new form. It should usher in a new form of leadership that is willing to be authentic about all these things. And let's think about what cybersecurity is. We're talking about the security of something that's super fundamental, which is data, and everything that we do is going to be generating data, and that data is enormously powerful in understanding us. So I think that this is probably one of the best industries to be in if you're looking for a career, and it's one of the ones that you really need to pay attention to, because you could really muck up your business. Now, if you do take the right efforts and you still have a breach, there's a lot to be said about holding your head up high and showing everything that you did, but you have to be able to show it. And I think that's really the key. So yes, there's a lot of fear in this as an operator, but that's why you need to do a lot. That's why you need to prepare. That's why you need to pull your team together and really give this much more than the lip service of just, filling out a poll and demonstrating concern.
Yeah, the market will be very withering for those that are defensive or not sharing, right? It's going to be it's going to be trouble. Yeah. Listen, it's been a great conversation, and I appreciate both of your time today. It's been a good talk. We could go on forever. It's a great topic. So Hamed Shahbazi, Well Health, and Alvin Madar, PwC, thanks so much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you, Kirk.
You've been watching BIB Today. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief. We'll see you again, and watch the other 2 parts of our 3-part series on the PwC CEO Survey. They're available now, of course, online.